fabulous to see you all here this morning on our first event of the year. Now, just a bit of sort of background to why we have chosen this particular topic. As many of you will remember, late last year, members of the team met with all of you to talk about, what's important to you, what sort of issues you are thinking about over the course of the coming year. And the subject of menopause came up quite a number of times. So we know this is an issue that you are thinking about. We know this is a topic that many of you have already started to address. So we thought it would be a great opportunity for us to come together today to hear from some fantastic speakers who I'll introduce to you in a moment, and to hear kind of, what some of our members are doing to support women who are going through the menopause. So just before I introduce the speakers, this topic is actually quite personal to me. I had an early menopause at the age of 38, and despite having a family history of early menopause, I still didn't recognise the signs in myself. Now, across the workforce, it's nearly made up, nearly 50% women. Many of those women will be experiencing symptoms of menopause. And this often comes at a time when women are reaching the kind of peak of their careers, maybe taking on, large roles with lots of responsibility. And the symptoms of menopause for many can be quite debilitating. I think there are around 1 million women a year who actually resign from their jobs for reasons relating to the menopause. And I was actually one of those individuals. I had a great job, which I loved, but I was starting to experience quite crippling anxiety. I wasn't sleeping at night, and I put it down to the job, and I thought the job was the problem. So I moved jobs, started a new one, and actually realised that the symptoms didn't go away. If anything, they got worse. And it wasn't until I became quite depressed that I sought help. But one of the things that really helped me actually was reading an article by a senior business leader at Barclays Bank. Now, I have been trying to get hold of this article again. I haven't been able to find it. So if you do know which article I'm talking about, please do share it with me. And it was a story of a woman who spoke about her time where she'd been taking on this rather big role at Barclays Bank whilst experiencing all these symptoms of menopause, and experiencing these symptoms in silence, because there was huge stigma about speaking up about some of these symptoms. But it was incredibly inspiring to me, and it was one of the reasons that I thought about what I was going through and how this resonated with this woman's experience. So if anyone has it, please do send it on. But if we get back to the event, I'm really thrilled, obviously, to have 3 wonderful speakers joining us today. We have Alaana Woods from Bupa. Alaana is a commercial director, and Alaana is going to be talking to us about why employers need to be thinking about menopause, why it's important, why this is a business issue. Alaana will also share with us some examples of employers who are doing great things in this area, and also share with us some of the things that Bupa are doing to support employers. We will then be hearing from Marzena from HSBC and Jenny from Linklaters, who've both been doing some great work there. So, Alaana, if I can hand over to you. Thanks very much.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'm Alaana, and I am the commercial director for Health Clinics. I'm also the women's health lead for Bupa, and I'm really pleased to be talking here today because women's health is a real passion of mine. And I talk a lot about how health inequality affects our businesses. So probably no surprise, menopause has been a really big focus of mine for the last few years. And I do these presentations a lot, and I always start with the statement, this is not a feminist issue, this is a business issue. And I'm speaking to, obviously, a group of people who are actually very experienced in the health and wellbeing space. So I probably won't need to go into very much detail around why diverse businesses are important. I think you're probably very well aware of the studies by McKinsey and Lloyd showing that diverse businesses, the more diverse they are, the better they perform. And I'm not alone in facing into this kind of talent issue that we have at the moment. The attraction and retention of talent is really important for our business. and for that of my clients. And I think the inclusion agenda is going to help us win that war on talent. So when it comes to senior leadership, we are still significantly underrepresented by women in the boardroom. And the numbers are higher than they were when we started this journey in 2019. But women on the boards of FTSE 250 is still only 30%. So when we make up, I think, 51.6% of the population, I find that a little bit irksome. And I think we as businesses can ask, what can we do about this? So it's my view, well, Bupa's view, that we as women are suffering from pervasive health inequality. And as a result of that, what we see is these breaks in our talent pipeline. And this happens around major life events for women. So pregnancy, obviously, and then secondly, when women go through menopause. So at Bupa, we started looking into this in real detail in 2019. And that was, if I'm honest, a commercial driver. We could see that inclusion was a huge topic for our customers, and they were losing talent. And we needed to understand why that was and help them build strategies to correct that. So I commissioned a piece of research back in 2019, Alison, you just quoted it, which was actually that almost 1 million women had left their job because of menopausal symptoms. But the thing that I found really interesting was there was this kind of compounding factor, that there were many, many others that were forced to take periods of absence to manage those symptoms. And that was kind of creating this huge loss of productivity. In 2019, it was actually quite a different landscape, although it was only a few years ago. Menopause as a topic was still quite taboo. We were really the only business having these conversations. And when we started speaking, it was almost like this is kind of a shameful thing. Women's health is shameful. We don't want to talk about these things. These symptoms are embarrassing. So one of the first things we did was work with a number of partners to help normalize the conversation, because every woman is going to go through the menopause, typically between the ages of 45 and 55. Almost all women will experience some symptoms, but for 25%, those are going to be significant. And they're physical symptoms. I think everyone's aware of the conversations around hot flushes or night sweats, which actually in themselves don't sound particularly challenging. But if we imagine this scenario, which, I loved presenting, and then we went to Teams, and I find it excruciating because I get no kind of visual or verbal feedback, and it's really tough to keep your energy up. So compound that with, feeling overwhelmed and sweating, etc. It would be really, really challenging. But there's also lesser known symptoms that Alison talked about. Things like anxiety is really common, depression, brain fog, and insomnia. And for those people that have ever, either had a child or suffered with insomnia, we know why they use that to torture people. It is debilitating. It's also really interesting to understand that menopausal women are our fastest growing demographic in the workplace. So there are currently about 9 million women between the age of 40 and 60 who might be experiencing some of these symptoms. And I just wanted to draw the link between menopause and mental health, because this is kind of an interesting factor. TV presenter Eureka Johnson, probably everyone knows of her. She was quoted as saying that she thought she had early onset Alzheimer's before she found out that her symptoms were that of perimenopause, which I think shows how pervasive it can be. And one of the other things that I don't think is coincidence, although I don't have the data to support this, but the women's loss of life through suicide actually picks up significantly during those years as well. So there is a link that we need to do more research into. So what we found through our studies is that women are sometimes not aware, or they are potentially underprepared for the symptoms, like Alison mentioned. And we have a health assessment business, and we found that of the women between the ages of 51 and 55, about 15% of those women had no idea if they were menopausal, perimenopausal, which shows us that whilst the conversation is normalizing, we need to do more and have better conversations. And I also find it interesting that when we are prepared to support women through much more expensive transitions like maternity and return to work. After that, actually, to support women with menopausal symptoms is actually relatively inexpensive, and we have a huge amount to gain in terms of experience. So women that are at the top of their game can stay in the business with the right support and are able to reach their full potential, which we all benefit for. So when I'm talking about this with customers and when I was putting together a strategy for Bupa, I was focusing really on three things. The first was around policy, the second was around education, and the third was about, how do women access services that are really needed? And when it comes to policy, I think there's two views. Some people feel like I want to have a very specific menopause policy because it gives people real clarity. Unfortunately, for Bupa, as a global organization operating in so many different countries, a policy for us wasn't appropriate. We felt that, what we would be able to do in the UK would be very different to what we'd be able to do in the Middle East. And to have a framework was a much more appropriate way of managing this. And that's what we found with our customers, really. There is a very split thought process in terms of how is the best way to support women here. And that's one of the reasons that we sponsored, and we're actually the first company to sign the Menopause Pledge, which is a partnership with Wellbeing of Women. And I don't know if you've seen that, but they're a charity that support research, fund research into women's health, which has been chronically underfunded. And this pledge commits to do three things. And I think these three things are a really good principle for your businesses. The first is recognizing that menopause can be an issue in the workplace and that women might need support. The second is about talking openly and positively and respectfully about the menopause. And the third is committing to actively supporting and informing employees affected by the menopause. So this is free to sign. I think it shows a commitment to your people. You're able to publicize this to your organization. There's also a lot of information available, which I'll come on to in a minute. So that is a good first step. We, as well as sponsoring that, any of our women's health products, we actually donate 5% of them to Wellbeing of Women to help fund this vital research. Oh, thanks. that was as if by magic, the campaign is in the chat box. So that's fantastic. So a little bit about our customers. So I wanted to talk about Channel 4, first of all. They were the first media company in the UK to have a dedicated menopause policy. And the reason I like this case study is because it captured headlines across the world. Channel 4 launched a policy. It was actually a ground up initiative from the creative director of C4 and the one of the legal counsel, and they formed a women's committee. And they decided that they would write the policy themselves, and they launched it in the business, which had great traction. And they just put it out, and it had huge uptake. But what happened on the back of that is the commissioners could see how relevant this conversation was. And on the back of that, they commissioned the Davina McCall documentary. I'm not sure if everyone has seen that or is aware of that, but it's really interesting. And what happened on the back of that is access to menopause services. There was a material shift. So we saw a 300% increase in people purchasing our menopause plan on the back of that. And I think it's a really good example of where businesses can be real tastemakers for society. And by normalizing the conversation within businesses, we actually have a material impact in terms of access to information and people accessing support. So Channel 4 were actually one of the first customers to implement the menopause plan, and they've had amazing feedback from women within their organization. And a lot of it is kind of verbatim, things like, accessing this information has saved my life, or I haven't got divorced because I've been able to access support that I needed. And I think it's so profound, the impact that actually speaking to someone can have. So at Bupa, I thought I would use Bupa as a case study as well. We've given all of our staff access to our menopause plan and our menopause helpline, which gives them the opportunity to speak to a menopause trained doctor. We implemented this for our people, and within the first day we had something like 50 bookings. We also launched this at one of our customers, City, and they had 17 bookings within the first couple of hours, which I think shows how needed it is For our customers, all of our customers have access to an anytime helpline, and we have menopause trained all of the people on that. We also launched a menopause health hub, which you guys are able to access. We had 40,000 views within the first 10 months. And I think that just goes to show the lack of information that was there, and the and how just giving people information actually gives us the ability to have these conversations and move the conversation forward. So all we're trying to do is help women stay well, give them information so that they can be educated on what's happening within their bodies, and give them the support so that they can remain in the workplace. So I think in terms of what you guys can do, I think, if you haven't considered policy, that's the best place to start. If policy isn't right for you, having a framework that can operate across multiple territories is important. And one of the biggest material changes we can make as businesses is actually saying we're going to treat menopause as a single period of sickness, which stops women, when they're looking to move organisations, being discriminated against. Secondly, normalising the conversations and educating your people. There's a load of information out there. I actually worked with the CIPD to create line manager guidance and training for menopause, which we can share after this as well. And then internal campaigns that we've found very successful within Bupa have been kind of expert panel sessions. Obviously, we're very lucky we've got access to doctors, but they have been really engaged. The last one had 400 women signed up to it.
Oh, looks like we might have lost Alaana, which is an incredible shame. But hopefully she will reconnect with us in a moment. But just to say, all of the resources which Alaana referenced, we will make sure that we share those with you after the session ends. And one thing I would just like to say in relation to accessing help is that, I often hear this from previous colleagues, from friends, that, there is a huge struggle for women, in recognizing the symptoms, but when they do, actually then being able to access help and access medication. My experience of medication that was, within 24 to 48 hours after starting HRT, I felt a completely different woman, and I felt almost back to normal. So it's incredibly important, I think, for women to get that advice and that access to help. So let's move on to our next speaker. I'd like to welcome Marzena Szponar from HSBC. Marzena is the Wellbeing and Events Coordinator. Marzena, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm representing HSBC, where a menopause topic is very important for us. With 31% of our workforce being female between the ages of 45 and 55, right in the menopause hotspot, we need to understand what they are going through and how we can best help to go through this natural transition and enable colleagues to thrive and be at the best. So at HSBC, menopause journey goes back to 2019 when we held our first talk on menopause with both female and male managers sharing their experiences. And then Menopause Employee Resource Group was formed in collaboration with HR and led by a very passionate colleague. Since then, our activities included launching a menopause helpline via Bupa, accessible to all employees and their dependents, where colleagues can get trusted information and clinical advice by talking to a menopause trained nurse, redesigning and piloting a menopause friendly HSBC UK uniform. The new uniforms are made out of a softer, more breathable materials and actually being rolled out this January. making it easier for colleagues to order a fan, whether working in a branch, office, or at home during the pandemic. Training 50 menopause advocates and 75 champions to help drive awareness and education around the topic. Building a community of 700 employees, including other employee resource groups, senior leaders, including male leaders, where we openly discuss menopause in the workplace. We are also holding weekly mental health lunch and learn awareness sessions for colleagues and managers on various discussion topics like stages of menopause and symptoms, how to support colleagues who are going through menopause. And we offer an ongoing program of events, like every October we are celebrating World Menopause Day. We also launched a menopause page on our UK Wellbeing site. The page features a range of resources, from podcasts with personal stories from colleagues to guides for managers and just how to have the positive and healthy conversation around menopause. Our approach is not to have one dedicated menopause policy, but employees and managers are encouraged to use existing policies, such as the sick absence and the special leave policies, to support time of work, for symptoms, illness, and should the employee need to attend a medical appointment during working hours. Last July, we were very, very humble to be recognized as a menopause-friendly employer. And we were the first in the UK to be recognized, including also First Direct and M&S. This accreditation recognizes inclusive employers that build awareness and understanding around menopause and takes the well-being of the colleagues seriously. So we are very proud and humble to have received the accreditation, but our work does not stop here. So what's next for us? So in 2022, our objectives are to further raise awareness about menopause, where this is no longer a taboo topic and should not hold women back. To also deliver monthly interactive sessions to colleagues and people leaders, raising awareness of the menopause and the impact it can have at work and at home, and where to get support. Continue working closely with our external partners and menopause experts to enhance our library of resources and guides. Also, to provide Train the Trainer program, where current mental health community chat can be delivered by an internal menopause advocate. Also share male colleague stories whose partner, a colleague, is going through a menopause. Last October, to mark World Menopause Day, we hosted a fireside chat with TV presenter Davina McCall and one of our leaders, HSBC leaders, Amanda Murphy, to help us all better prepared for menopause and create a more inclusive workplace. Thanks to Davina and other people like her in the public eye speaking up, many more people affected by the menopause are feeling empowered to seek help and share their experiences. The event was delivered and sponsored by so many different groups within HSBC: Menopause Group, Balance Employee Resource Group, First Direct, and MS Bank, as they all recognize the importance of menopause in the workplace. The interest was overwhelming. We had over 1,000 colleagues, male and female, attending the event across different business areas. The spectrum of the audience varied from colleagues going through the menopause, colleagues supporting someone who is going through the menopause, and colleagues thinking about how it would affect them in the future. So those are our objectives for 2022. Thank you so much.
Marzena, thank you, and congratulations on the accreditation. First off, it sounds like you've been doing some fantastic work at HSBC, and I think what I was really pleased to hear that the work that you're doing is not just focusing on supporting the women, but also engaging the men in the conversation, because I think the more both men and women are listening and understand, the better things will be. Just in terms of engagement, I mean, it sounds like you've had great engagement on this topic, and I know with people like Davina and others that there is a better conversation going on in the sort of outside world. But were there any sort of ways you can suggest, perhaps for those starting out or just sort of starting to talk about menopause? Was there anything that you felt was really successful in the rolling out of some of these activities?
Yeah, so I think opening up a conversation, we sometimes feel like not brave enough to start talking to people leaders, but I think talking to people leaders, maybe attending the meetings and raising awareness about menopause, educate them how important this topic is in the business, how important it is for our workforce to feel supported. So that's how we did in HSBC. The topic started by a very passionate colleague of ours who was going through menopause herself and just felt like there was not enough awareness. And I think, sometimes we just feel like, maybe we not, as I said, we not feel brave enough to talk about it, but I feel like engage with other employee resource group and making sure that we all kind of trying to support our women colleagues who are 45 to 55 years old, is at the peak of their careers, and this is extremely important topic. And so I would be suggesting, be brave, open up those conversations, and we've got so many research supporting menopause at the workplace, and that would be my kind of suggestion to any business who is thinking about kind of rolling the program out. Brilliant.
Well, thank you, Marzena. Your passion for this shines through. So thank you so much for your time. I'm aware that Alaana has also joined back, but Alaana, we'll come to you just before Q&A, just so you can obviously finish off your speech with us. So next, Jenny Lloyd from Linklaters. Jenny is the Diversity and Wellbeing Manager at Linklaters, and I know you've been doing some great things there, Jenny, so please do share.
Hello. My mute kept going on, sorry. My headphones were talking to me. Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you today, but actually more of a pleasure for me to listen to Alaana and Marzena about what they're doing. Thank you for also listening to me talk a bit about our journey. As Alison said, I'm the Diversity and Wellbeing Manager at Linklaters. If you are not aware who we are a law firm based in the city. So menopause is a topic that we have been looking at for a few years, largely through our health and wellbeing program. So we've almost treated it as a health and wellbeing issue up until a few years ago, but we are now starting to look at it as a diversity issue to do with, you know, a certain life stage. So until a few years ago, we would sporadically invite guest speakers, whether they be doctors or occupational psychologists, in to talk about different aspects of menopause, such as sleep and HRT. But in 2019, we recognised that the menopause was really starting to be seen as the next mental health, and we want to take what we were doing a little bit further. So we started, based on employee feedback and a request, by introducing a menopause support group, as HSBC have also done, and the purpose of that was really to end the taboo and to bring that conversation into the workplace quite openly. It was advertised, you know, to everybody. We didn't specify that it had to be for women only. You know, we kind of didn't really put any boundaries in, but we wanted to empower anybody experiencing menopause or living and supporting somebody who is, to share, connect and support each other. That has had relatively good success. Meetings happen, you know, every couple of months. Sometimes it depends on who is around the table as to how much engagement you get, and sometimes, you know, there's been that conversation, but also we have invited guest speakers along into that group to spark discussion, and it can be really nice to hear that, you know, what is being discussed and that people are actually getting benefit from that. Alongside that, we did create a UK policy, although like HSBC, that was really to send the signal that this is something that the firm recognises as a workplace issue, and to, you know, to show that we are supportive of anybody going through that. But it wasn't a menopause policy as such. It was largely making that connection to other policies. So we signpost that approach to agile working and encourage people who need to have a discussion about changing work arrangements to do that. Talk about the dress code, which at Linklaters is a flexible dress code, so we just make people aware of that. The absence policies, and also signposting further support such as health and safety, also our on-site GP and psychological support services. So just making, again, that connection that's already been mentioned about the effects that it can have on mental health as well. So far what we've done has been well received, although we do see that there is continuing increased attention externally on menopause, largely because of people such as Davina McCall and Mariella Frostrup and their documentaries, and also their campaigns and fight for legislation. So we are committed to evolving our approach in 2022, and we recognise, you know, we're not quite where we should be with what we've done so far. So we are working closely with our internal employment law practice, who are advising clients on this issue as well and speaking to clients. And we have an ambition to do what we've done so far with the raising awareness, but looking at how we can take that globally. So inviting our global colleagues to join the support group, and also looking at a global policy, although you know, considering the challenges that have been mentioned about how difficult a global policy can be. So I'm very interested in the idea of a framework instead. And looking at training and further awareness raising through talks, but also creating those resources pages. So it's really encouraging to hear what the other companies have been doing. Looking at going globally, one challenge we have had in the past has come from offices in locations when we've shared what we've done in the UK, they haven't felt ready for the menopause conversation. You know, there's been no context for them as to why it's a workplace issue. In the UK, there is quite a lot of media around it. So we did have an allergic reaction from one of our offices, And, you know, we are very mindful, being a UK headquartered company, that we do need to do more work on raising awareness, so that we are bringing all of our offices along, even where it's not on the radar of some countries, and really positioning it as the next mental health. And, you know, sharing stories, I think, has been a great way to include people on that journey. So we are at the start, but yeah, do let me know if you've got any questions, but that's really where we're at.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jenny. And I know you're at the start, but I think you've taken some great strides in developing your policy and thinking about some of the policies and processes that sit around that. Just in terms of, I suppose, uptake or utilisation, I mean, these are probably quite difficult things to measure, but have you had anecdotal feedback? Have you been hearing through maybe the HR team that there are individuals who are taking advantage of the policy and it's helping them?
In all honesty, not really, but we do have feedback that some of our benefits haven't quite served people going through the menopause, so particularly the healthcare provision. So we are also working closely with the benefits team to make sure that what we have available is inclusive, and you know, people aren't ruled out because it's related to menopause. So that's important. So we've had feedback from that. And then through the group, people have said it's been really helpful. I think we started the group and then the pandemic came shortly after, where we were all agile working anyway. So we did get feedback from people coming to the meetings that they found it a lot easier to manage symptoms from home.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, certainly in the dress code anyway.
Yeah.
So no, brilliant. Thank you so much, Jenny. And I think you also raised quite an important point, and it's not where we'd really recommend employers start, but I did read something before Christmas about the increase in the number of discrimination claims that were being put forward for reasons relating to menopause. So I do think it's, in terms of a kind of risk liability perspective, you know, employers do need to think that, you know, think about putting in, you know, adequate steps to support women. So thank you. Now, before I hand over to the group, just to kind of open up the discussion and obviously an opportunity to ask our speakers any questions. Alaana, are you there? Vicky, do we know if we have Alaana? Oh, there you are. Wonderful. Alaana, you were just closing your segment. And I know you were just sort of covering off the items that you talked about, and we kind of got to framework, and that's come up a little bit. And I don't know if there's anything more you can say around what should be in a framework for those thinking about global approaches. Oh, Alaana, I think are you on mute, Alaana? Oh, the joys of technology. Well, we can't hear you, Alaana, but what I suggest we can do is perhaps we can pick up with you following the event, and we can put some of that in the follow-up guide, because we'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and just a shame the tech's not allowing us to. Okay, well, thank you, Alaana. Hopefully, if there's any questions, we might be able to do that through chat. So if we can now open up to the group, does anyone, first of all, have any questions for any of our speakers? Vicky, I wonder if we can change the view just so I can see everyone.
Yeah, it's on gallery view now. Can you see everyone?
I can see you.
There's no spotlights on, so you might have to
change your
view. Yeah.
Okay. Right, there we go. Okay, hands up. Who's? Oh, Susan, if I come to you first.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, everybody. Really fantastic. First of all, thank you, Alison, for being so brave to share your story. I think I'm at the opposite end from you, just to share that I'm 56 and have only realised recently that I'm going through the menopause, and rather ashamed I hadn't realised it before, but it is completely debilitating. And so I'm really delighted about the work that this group is doing in your respective businesses. The question I had was, I'm really interested in this concept of frameworks. So I work for Hogan Lovells big international law firm, and thinking about other countries and any experience that people can share about the different cultural reactions to this would just be really helpful to me in thinking about what we take from what we might be doing here in the UK to, for example, the United States or to Asia. So if anyone's got any sort of insights into that and the challenges, I'd be really keen to hear.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you for sharing. It looks like Alaana is with us and able to speak. And I think, Alaana, this might be a good question to come to you first.
I'm really hoping this works. Apologies, everyone. We apparently are getting Giga Clear at some point, and I can't wait. So in terms of a framework, what we have done is put together some guiding principles, which we then allow the regions to fill in with the things that are appropriate. So we kind of put a gold standard and then work backwards from that. So one of the things that we've found is kind of Middle East and Asia have been less willing to have those conversations. And what we found here is storytelling works very well. We've actually found, obviously, UK, we seem to be significantly more able to have these conversations and it's less taboo. So we've just had to allow the local teams the ability to launch in the ways that they feel is appropriate. But we've also put frameworks around what managers are able to do in terms of leave, things like uniforms that HSBC gave that example to, allowing people to start later if they're suffering with insomnia. And actually, we could probably share that as well, if that would be of use to you. Yeah.
Absolutely, Alaana.
Yeah. But I think the storytelling and opening up of that dialogue has been, no matter what territory, has been very important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, that chimes in with, all of our work around mental health and the power of storytelling. So, no, that's great, Alaana. Does anyone else, either our speakers or anyone else on the call, have any experience of rolling out these type of policies or activities globally?
Hi, it's Florence Henderson here at Moody's. Hi, good morning to you all. I just put something in the chat, but we have come part of the way, like HSBC and Linklaters, and hosted 2 separate sessions, one for our UK line managers and one for those and for all employees. And we had a panel event where we invited men as well. Previous to us hosting the all-employee event, it nearly didn't happen, as we received emails from quite senior people in the US stating that they were very resistant. Why were we holding this event? So there was a whole furore around it, a late scramble on a Friday night, to provide information as to what was going to be covered and why, et cetera, again. And the revelation came about that it was just a Chinese whisper. Where they were told we were going to be hosting this event on menopause, but they had no idea. They hadn't looked at the invitation. They hadn't looked at any of the content. It was just a real, you can't possibly talk about it. That was it. There was no real tangible reason why we couldn't address it. So they spoke, so our chief of diversity met with those people, spoke to them on a personal level, and put them straight, to be quite honest and to be quite blunt, and they had no resistance. Once he'd presented why we were, and the whole reason why they were resistant, and to breaking that taboo and to making it a safe place for people to be able to talk about. And we've not heard a word from them since, really, on that. So it's very, very difficult. It has been difficult. So rolling it out globally, I think, is going to be a real struggle for us. So we have hosted those 2 events. We're about to start our kind of lunch and learn sessions, or support sessions. We're going to be starting those off very soon. But yeah, you may find resistance from the US, and obviously in APAC it still seems very much as taboo. And they also start menopause a lot earlier there as well, around 45-ish, I think, or even younger, across Asia as well.
Just to echo what Florence was saying, we got our resistance came quite viscerally from the US. They had no idea why we were even talking about it, and you know, they were very allergic to doing anything.
Do you mind if, Alison, if I just make a comment? One of the things I found very helpful is that I decided that I would find myself a senior male leader in the business to help normalise the conversation. So Alex Perry, who's the CEO of our UK insurance business, when I was talking to him, some kind of cogs started turning, and he realised that his mother, who had been very senior in JWT, had left the board as a result of her menopause and unfortunately never returned to her career, and the impact that that had on him as a child. And one of the things that he was then able to do was talk about it, but firstly from a business perspective, and look at the financial performance of the teams. So more gender diverse teams were performing better. So talking about it from a financial perspective, but then also talking about it from a from a human perspective of his mother leaving the workforce. And I think that Alex being involved in that conversation, because it is a business issue and it's so easily pigeonholed into a women's issue, as I've said before, actually he has allowed me to access different groups of people that I think, had I, being a strident woman, being able to access, and in terms of that storytelling, I think it was really critical to, so for example, getting the menopause plan signed off for all of our women. Had I not have had Alex in my camp, I don't think that would have happened so easily.
No, I wholeheartedly agreed, and we had that same approach, but because we were piloting just for the UK, we had the head of our UK office attend the manager session and actually kick off the all employee session. But that resistance came from people in the US who had who were interested. Some of them who were interested in attending, but those who were resistant had no call to be. The event was not for them, but they just wanted to have their 2 penneth worth, and just to
frustrating.
Yeah, very frustrating, very. So we've been very lucky in that, our head of our global head of diversity is a man, and we had the support of our HR, our head of HR as well. We briefed our HR business partners. We provided and worked with legal and our benefits team on a guide which points out sort of support networks and other resources, etc., that we've provided, and we've created a SharePoint site. So we've done an awful lot, but rolling it out to the US, I think, I'm not sure how that's going to happen, if at all.
Well, I mean, from my perspective, well done on persevering. And I think, sometimes it's just taking those small steps. And whilst, I'm not surprised that perhaps you had the pushback, I'm sure there will be plenty of women in particular who will have really welcomed the advice, the support that you were able to provide. And if I reflect back on the D&I journey and, the mental health journey, we had very similar experiences. So small steps. I can see on the chat that, we've had agreement with the power of storytelling in helping people to come around to why this is such an important issue. And again, just engaging men as well as the women in, seeing this as a really important business issue. This isn't about being soft. This is about supporting, half the workforce who will be going through what, is a very difficult time in their lives. Tejal, I'll come to you now. I know you've had your hand up.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you for everyone for sharing and what you're doing. We have a similar challenge in that we're looking to kind of provide support on a more global basis. And unfortunately, we don't have sort of one medical provider or one or consistent benefit providers in all of our countries. And we're often approached by companies who offer really good sort of expert advice and platforms perhaps on menopause, but they're very UK focused. And I guess I just wondered if anyone has come across any sort of providers who are sort of specialists in these areas, but serve that more kind of global, have that more global focus.
Anyone? I know this is a challenge.
So I can.
Alaana, go ahead.
I was going to say it is a challenge to provide these services globally. So obviously we're a global provider, but the legislation is different in the different countries. So when you're working with what we're talking about here is medical advice. The teams that we're using are based in the UK, so we are, legally unable to provide that kind of intervention across multiple territories. And I'm not aware of a global provider as yet. So it's likely that you might need a coalition of providers to be able to give you that global coverage.
Okay, that's really useful to know, thanks.
Lovely. Right, anyone else have any other questions? Or are there any other examples anyone would like to share in terms of what your organisations are doing? Okay, well, I have one last question, and it's for you, Alaana, and it's, I know you've answered this question in relation to global, but just thinking about organisations, I know obviously Bupa, for your, your customers, the organisations you work with, obviously you have a whole programme of support around menopause, and I would imagine perhaps similar organisations have the same. But for those organisations that perhaps may not have the support of Bupa or similar, where would you recommend the kind of signposting, or how can employers provide women with support for menopause? Are there other things that employers can think about doing?
Yeah, so I think the part of the conversation that I haven't had yet is around access to service. And this is something that we have seen until I think 2015, GPs weren't actually trained in menopause. So a lot of women who are going to a doctor to have a conversation are sometimes being pushed in the wrong direction, or sometimes being given things like antidepressants when actually they might need different interventions. So one of the things I think is really important is, you may not be in a position where you want to give them access to service, but giving them access to information so that they can appropriately challenge NHS GPs, or making them aware that typically within a NHS practice there will be someone who specialises in women's health, and that they need to find out who that GP is. But also then allowing them the time to have those conversations. And what we found from our menopause plan is actually 70% of the women that come to us have already seen a GP, and 50% of those women have seen them 3 times or more and have not had the intervention that they need. So we kind of in a perfect storm where there wasn't training as standard until 2015, but also there was a lot of misinformation around HRT, which I think does need to be corrected. And so the access to information is really important. If in terms of free information, there's the CIPD reports that I mentioned before, which is kind of line manager training. And there's loads of useful information and things that you can use within your environment. And then in terms of individual information for the women themselves, we have a women's health hub, which is completely free to access. There's loads of content and digital conversations with our doctors, and just even disseminating that to your people will give people information that they might not currently have access to, which will better inform their conversations with their NHS GPs.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alaana. We'll make sure that we share all of that.
Thank you.
Xenia, I see you have your hand up.
Alison, and thanks to all the speakers. The really interesting presentations about the work that you're doing. My name's Xenia. I work in the City and Hackney Public Health team, and I did have a question about sort of what inspired the organisations to start looking at menopause in the first place, but I feel like that's probably already been mentioned, so I was just going to sort of add a comment to what Alaana just mentioned, because we are having conversations with our local NHS about how to exactly that, so how to sort of support women through perimenopause and menopause better than perhaps the NHS has been sort of previously, and also sort of what that means for additional skills development for GPs and other primary care staff, and we've been trialing some really interesting things locally around sort of peer mentor sessions for women, education sessions, how to access information, things like that. So pardon me, it does sort of, looking at it locally, but also thinking about how it might be applied nationally, it does look as though sort of the NHS is having a bit more of a focus on this, which is really good news.
Brilliant, thank you, Xenia, and I totally agree. It's certainly needed, and I know a few I've seen in the chat have mentioned peer support groups, and I know many of you will have employee resource groups, employee networks. So tapping into those if they aren't already talking about menopause is definitely worth thinking about. I'm conscious of time. I know Vicky has put a survey in the chat, so can I really encourage you, please, to click on the link and complete the survey. Just in terms of summing up, we will share all of the resources and things that have been mentioned in the event today, including the pledge. So again, we'd really encourage organisations to sign up to that pledge. So we will share the information. In terms of us and upcoming events, just a very quick plug and reminder for 2 events that are coming up soon. The next event is the Parents Toolkit launch. This is a toolkit that we have been developing in partnership with PwC, Morgan Stanley and the Bank of England, along with contributions from Young Minds, Place to Be, King's College London and the Maudsley NHS Trust. The toolkit is essentially a signposting guide for parents. As you can imagine, there are increasing numbers of parents who have concerns about the mental health of their children or are supporting children with mental health issues. So this is a guide to support them and really help them to get the access to help that they need. The event's on the 2nd of February. It's open to everybody. So again, it's not just our member lead senior sponsors. Please do share that with members of your teams widely. And then the following event is our global event, so Global Practitioners event coming up in February. And Vicky, I can't remember the date off the top of my head for that one.
The global is the 22nd of February.
2nd of Feb. So please do look out and sign up for that. But I will give you 2 minutes back in your diaries for a quick break, probably before your next Zoom call. But thank you for joining. It's been a wonderful discussion, and a special thanks to our speakers for sharing their wonderful work with us. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.